Hey, this is Mr. Spencer. We're going to read a couple poems today on the poem bank. First one is The Groundhog by Richard Eberhart, and then we'll take a look at another one called The Tradition by Jericho. See what we can uncover for these two poems. The first one is fairly straightforward. The second poem is more difficult. All right. This was published in 1986. Does that mean anything to you? Were there any historical events in the 1980s that you think might have influenced any themes or subject matter here? I was born in 1987. I know the president was Ronald Reagan at this time. So, not sure in your U.S. history class or anywhere else if that historical context means anything to you. Let's read the poem, and then we'll take a look at, can we summarize or paraphrase it? The Groundhog. In June, amid the golden fields, I saw a groundhog lying dead. Dead lay he, my senses shook, and mind outshot our naked frailty. There, lowly, in the vigorous summer, his form began its senseless change, and made my senses waver dim, seeing nature ferocious in him. Inspecting close his maggot's might and seething cauldron of his being, half with loathing, half with a strange love, I poked him with an angry stick. The fever arose, became a flame, and vigor circumscribed the skies. Immense energy in the sun, and through my frame a sunless trembling. My stick had done nor good nor harm. Then stood I silent in the day, watching the object as before, and kept my reverence for knowledge, trying for control, to be still, to quell the passion of the blood, until I had bent down on my knees, praying for joy in the sight of decay. And so I left, and I returned in autumn, strict of eye, to see the sap gone out of the groundhog, but the bony sodden hulk remained. But the year had lost its meaning, and in intellectual chains I lost both love and loathing. Mured up in the wall of wisdom, another summer took the fields again, massive and burning, full of life. But when I chanced upon the spot, there was only a little hair left, and bones bleaching in the sunlight, beautiful as architecture. I watched them like a geometer, and cut a walking stick from a birch. It has been 3 years now. There is no sign of the groundhog. I stood there in the whirling summer, my hand capped a withered heart, and thought of China and of Greece, of Alexander in his tent, of Montaigne in his tower, of Saint Therese in her wild lament. Some of the key lines of this poem. This is the one I am most vexed by. Mind outshot. What was outshot? Did I outshoot my expectations? Did it overcome my original expectations of what seeing a dead animal lying on the ground would look like? And who is our? Am I associating myself with the groundhog? Does this mean my mind was blown? By what? Weakness? Frailty? Why was my mind blown? That's, I think, the hardest line, to sort of wrap your mind around in the first part of the poem. And then this one, too, I also find very strange. My senses wavered dim. What happened to my senses? They wavered? I got 5 senses at least. Was there a 6th sense? Why are they dim? Are they weaker? Do my senses become weaker as I saw this groundhog decaying and its corpse deteriorating? The poem seems to progress through a type of seasonal progression, and then by the end, it's been 3 years as the speaker of the poem keeps returning to this spot, seeing further stages of decay. We start in June, right? This is late spring, early summer. Doesn't summer start like June 21st, 22nd, the solstice? So then summer comes. I continue to look, and as summer comes, the heat rises. You see several connotations of hot heat. You see hot language here. But then it gets colder. It used to have so much energy, life, invigorated by the heat of the sun, the warmth of the sun. This is where we get all of our energy from, yes? But then a sunless trembling. I'm cold. I tried to poke it, but it didn't even make any difference to this. I stood silent in the day. I wonder if the day here is not just a literal day of 24 hours, but could this day be representative of the progression of someone's whole life? From infancy to adulthood to old age? Is that the day of our life? The sun rises and the sun sets. Think about it. It's a common metaphor used in poetry. So the day itself might actually represent some larger context or meaning. The red-hot fiery passion does contrast and juxtapose with the sight of decay, and things get a little colder as we head towards autumn and winter. Over the year, it seems like the meaning of this originally that might have blown my mind has lost its meaning. I looked at it intellectually, but my emotions and my intellect maybe don't reconcile as I look at this dead creature many, many months later. With love and loathing, deep hatred, they're mured up, stocked up, stored, controlled, contained. They've lost power in a wall of wisdom. My intellect, my wisdom have basically made it somewhat meaningless. This hot, fiery connotation continues, but over the months and the seasons, only a little hair of that creature remains. I don't know. The maggots, the other animals, the vultures, other predators have now eaten what's left, consumed it, gotten energy from this other dead creature. We go back to where we get our energy from, the sunlight, a common motif throughout the poem. Could you annotate this on perusal? What are the hot sunlight and the sunless connotations? What's this contrast between heat and cold have to do with our ultimate meaning in the poem? After 3 years, the speaker's return to that spot doesn't see anything left. Continues to remind us of that hot, whirling summer, the heat whirling around us. Whew, the atoms. Hot, moving, animated. But my hand capped a withered heart. My heart is colder, withered, like a flower dying. It's withered. I thought of what kind of connotations. Some of the countries with the oldest history we know of. Not the United States. We're a pretty young country. But countries like Greece and China, they have some of the most ancient histories and cultures known to mankind. We have people like Alexander, Montaigne, Saint Therese. Some notes about who they are on the back of our paraphrasing assignment that we'll do in class. Saint Therese was a French Catholic nun who is widely acclaimed in modern times, known popularly as the Little Flower of Jesus. Okay, for Catholics and Christians, she felt an early call, became a nun at an early age of 15, and then joined a nunnery, a community in Normandy. She was a devout nun but died very young, famously young at age 24 after a slow and painful fight against tuberculosis. Okay, you can look her up if you want to see any biographies or Wikipedia entries on Saint Therese. What does the poem say about her? It ends with this image of her in wild lament. What does her lament, her wild tragedy, the sadness of her slow and painful death? What could it symbolize as we relate it to ourselves, relate it to the speaker of the poem, or relate it to this rodent, this groundhog? Montaigne was a philosopher who basically popularized the essay. He wrote autobiographies, essays, and articles, and his massive volume, The Essayist, contains some of the most influential essays ever written. He's famously known for this French translation of What Do I Know? I can't speak French, but what do I know is basically like, what are the limits of my knowledge? What are the limits of my intellect? And you kind of see before it's mentioned at the end of the poem, these intellectual chains and the wall of wisdom that the speaker of the poem feels like he's coming up against. His power to identify and interpret the meaning of this dead rodent reaches its limits. The walls of wisdom are reached. That's how I interpret Montaigne writing essays in his tower famously. And Alexander, there's a pretty famous Alexander. He was known as a great man. He was a ruler in ancient Greece. He was charismatic, ruthless, brilliant, power-hungry, very famous as he tried to conquer much of Europe in BC times. And he ran his army apparently from a loyal tent where his war council would meet in a large pavilion. The tent also contained a vestibule, an armory, and the king's personal apartment. The tent was guarded at all times by a special detachment of hypastists, of guards and shield carriers. Okay, there's an illustration and a painting of it, and I'm curious what kind of thesis statement you could come up about the poem at the end of our assignment here after we paraphrased it. Okay, so we'll do this assignment. You also need to do 3 annotations for this on perusal. All right, you can pause the video here or continue as I go into Jericho Brown's The Tradition. This was published in 2015. See what you can make of this. The Tradition. Aster, Nestortidium, Delphinium. We thought fingers in dirt meant it was our dirt. Learning names in heat, and elements classical philosopher said could change us. Stargazer, foxglove. Summer seemed to bloom against the will of the sun, which news reports claimed flamed hotter on this planet than when our dead fathers wiped sweat from their necks. Cosmos, baby's breath. Men like me and my brothers filmed what we planted for proof we existed before too late. Sped the video to see blossoms, brought in seconds, colors you expect in poems, where the world ends. Everything cut down. John Crawford, Eric Garner, Mike Brown. Now, the italicized words in the poem are there intentionally. The author italicized them. And if you look up stargazer or foxglove, you'll see these are actually technical names for different flowers. Okay, baby's breath is over here. Different flowers like stargazer flowers. And then some flowers are also known by their Latin names. This is Latin. An old tradition. Latin is the oldest language, and it's also a dead language. Nobody speaks Latin anymore, but it influenced much of Spanish, English, German, French, and many other languages. Our fingers in the dirt here. Are we talking literally or figuratively? And what's this filming? The poem's from 2015. Is this related to camera phones? We filmed things for proof we existed? We sped up the video? If you look up any of these names, you look up the flowers, feel free to check. Maybe YouTube, or maybe you want to look at Wikipedia. I'll pull it over here. Does this name mean anything? What do you make of this poem? Is there a shift? Why are some of the words italicized? What's the connection between these flowery italicized words, old Latin names for flowers, and these last 3 names that are italicized? Flowers can literally be cut down, but what else can figuratively be cut down? I'm curious to see what you think, and how do modern technologies play into some old ancient traditions? What does the title of the poem mean? Can you annotate that? I'll leave you to look through that and the next few poems that we'll take a look at, including this one from our classmate Jenna Lang recommended. This is Mr. Spencer signing off.